Hey guys, this is John from US Dash Camera. Today I got a review on the AUTO-VOX A118C. So I did already review an A118C, and this one's considered an upgraded version. So this is considered upgraded because it does have a 1296p 30 frame per second mode. Other than that, as far as I can tell, it's pretty much the same camera as before. So I'm not going to go into the 1080p footage. From my testing, it seems like it's the exact same. So I'm going to link down below to my original A118C review so you can check that out. And this review is just going to focus on the 1296p portion. So the A118 is sort of a generic camera. I believe the original was made by Viafo, and they actually have a A119 model out that does 1440p and 1080p 60. Now it's worth noting that this camera does not do 1080p 60, it still only does 1080p at 30 frames per second. So you can see it's just like all the other A118s. It comes with a cable hider, so you can sort of make it look like it's just part of your mirror. It's one of the reasons why this camera is really popular. It just uses a standard mini USB power cable, and we got a couple other accessories like cable clips. The one big noticeable difference is it does have that bright colored button for the lock function. Other than that, it's pretty much a standard A118 on the outside. So I wasn't too sure what was really upgraded about it besides the fact that it does 1296p. It doesn't say anything about it on the Amazon page, which I will provide a link down for in the description. And AUTO-VOX's website doesn't have any information on this specific model either. So you can see this is just like the previous models with the GPS in and audio video out. Now you might have missed it, but on the top right it said I was going to get 4 hours and 25 minutes of footage, and this is a 32 gigabyte memory card, and this is by default at 1080p with high dynamic range. So the menu is pretty much the same. You do have to stop the recording to get into the menu. Then the record and mic buttons are up and down, and the emergency lock button is select. So once you get in there, we can select resolution. I'm going to set it to 1296p because that's what I really want to test. Everything else is pretty much the same. I like the loop recording to as short as possible. High dynamic range I'll leave on. The exposure value, I'm just going to set that at the standard. Keep motion detection off. So the rest of these options are pretty standard. Audio on or off, date stamp, GPS on or off, and G-sensor on or off. Now the motion detection isn't going to make a great parking mode camera because I'll talk about the chipset later, but there is a delay in the motion detection. It's not really made to constantly be running motion detection, so I wouldn't personally recommend it. Now the auto power off is how long the camera stays on if it's not recording. And again, these are all pretty standard features. So many different generic cameras use this exact same menu, most of the time sharing 80 to 90% of the same options. TV mode, you do want NTSC for North America. Frequency you'll set at 60 Hz, otherwise street lights will flicker in your video. Screensaver is how long the screen stays on while you're driving. I like that as short as possible also. Format the card real quick because I put the card in for the very first time. It's always a good idea to format your card in the camera. So here I took the time to put my US Dash name in there, and there's the firmware. It says it was just early September. I received this at the end of September, so this seems like pretty up-to-date firmware. Now if you're new to dash cameras, the middle orange button is to lock the current file. So say you see something really important on the road, if you hit that button, you'll see that sign showed up on the top of the screen. This will lock the file so it won't be overwritten. But if you do lock a lot of files, you should format the memory card once in a while to make sure you're not taking up too much space. So since this is YouTube, it doesn't have a native 1296p mode, so I will provide links down in the description to where you can download some of these raw files. That way you can see it for yourself, because I'm just going to be explaining my opinion on how I felt about the video quality. And like I mentioned earlier, the 1080p footage, as far as I've been able to tell, is the exact same. So if you're interested in the 1080p footage, check my other A118 review. Again, I'll list that in the description too. So one thing I noticed right away was, while this camera during the day does look very detailed at times, once it starts getting moving, it does start to get pixelated. So sometimes license plates of cars driving by are pretty hard to read. It's almost reminiscent of black view cameras for me, because black view cameras, they have so many special features like GPS and Wi-Fi and buffered parking mode, yet they sort of lack in terms of bitrate. Those cameras are around 10 megabits per second at 1080p. This camera with 1296p, I've gotten between 10 to 13 megabits per second. I've had different files showing different bit rates, so it seems to be a variable bit rate. Now, I can't claim to be an expert on video codecs. I'm just going based on what Windows is telling me. But like I mentioned, it does get pixelated because it's a pretty low bit rate for 1296p video, I think. Now, the original A118 with 1080p was around 14 to 15 megabits per second, including audio. And I checked this camera at 1080p, and it's the same. It's about 14 to 15 megabits per second at 1080p. So the 1296p is lower bit rate. So to me it seems like a trade-off. Now, especially at lower speeds, it does look more detailed, but once you get really moving and during high speed situations like on the freeway, then it's a trade-off because the lower bit rate starts to make the video look pixelated. I wouldn't say it's as bad as black view cameras during the day, but it's definitely noticeable. Now, the night footage doesn't fare so well. I'd say a couple of years ago this was pretty standard, but there's been a lot of cameras the last few years that have come out that have much better video quality at night. And I think the reason behind this is this camera isn't necessarily really upgraded, and I'll talk about that later. It's just an A118 that supports 1296p by lowering the bit rate. So it's not the worst camera at night that I've used, but it is still pretty dark, and if you're looking for a camera with really good night vision, you're probably going to have to spend a bit more. Now, I feel like this camera came out at sort of a strange time because the A119 just came out recently, earlier this year. Now, I haven't used the A119 myself, but from what I've seen, it does have pretty good 1080p 60 and 1440p footage, and it looks, I'd say, significantly or at least noticeably better at night than the A118. So this camera is almost like a half upgrade to me. It's just giving you another option. So if you already have an A118, you're not gonna really get some significant improvement at all. Like I said, I think it's personally a trade-off to use the 1296p. And here you can see at night it's really dark. This is one of the roads I have been taking a lot of times now to test out night footage, and on the left side you can't see the curb at all, so it's pretty dark. You can really only see directly in front of my vehicle. So I think there are better options for just a little bit more money out right now. If you really want to save money, I mean, I would say this one is a decent option, considering it's an A118 but with a 1296p option to use. It's also important to notice that the time and my US dash name, nothing shows up. There's no timestamp or anything for whatever reason. But basically it's still the same camera that it was a year or two ago. So I really wanted to find out if anything was really different on the inside. I opened it up, and I also wanted to verify that there was a capacitor, and yes, there is a capacitor. I did get this from Amazon. So I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but the Novatech processor in here is the same 96650 chipset that the A118C has always used, or the G1W. So I can't really say this enough, I guess. I've repeated this multiple times, but basically, you're getting an A118C, and it just happens to have a 1296p option also in the menu that has a lower bitrate than the 1080p mode. So if you're in the market for an A118C, I would say go for it if it's the price you're looking for. If you could get this for the same price or cheaper as a regular A118C, then that's awesome. You're gonna basically get the same 1080p footage. And of course, if you don't mind sacrificing a little bit of the bitrate, you do have the 1296p mode. Now, personally, if I was going to buy a dash camera and I had to choose between the A118 or the A119, I'm more than likely going to spend just $20 extra to get the A119, because I think that camera, besides having better video quality, as far as I've seen, also has a lot of other features that is not so standard in a lot of these generic cameras. So again, check the description down below for my original A118 review. Also the links for the raw download files if you want to check out the actual files from the camera. So for full disclosure, while I did order this through Amazon, AUTO-VOX did give me a discount to receive it for much cheaper for review. Of course, I will provide the links down below to where I purchased it if you're interested also. If you like this video or my other videos, I'd appreciate it if you hit like and subscribe. As usual, drive safe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.